You're so focused on the objective, which is the door is closed, I've got to open this. You get all rattled up, and so your concentration and your focus becomes so narrow, you can't perceive the world around you. Because I wasn't able to pay attention, because I was so obsessed with opening the door, pulling on that door, got to get the door open. What am I going to do? And then you take a breath, you sit down, you give up, and you look down on the floor, and there are the keys to the door.
This is the Mindfulness Experience podcast. My name is Keith Fiveson. On this podcast, I spoke with Brett Hill, who is the co-founder of the Future is Mindful conference. Brett is a professional speaker, a trainer, a coach, an author who specializes in mindful communications. As the host of the Language of Mindfulness podcast, I met Brett as a guest, and he interviewed me previously. Brett is an interesting man who has distilled a lifetime of deep study and practice into mindful communications. He has a degree in interpersonal communications, has taught meditation to many hundreds of people, and has studied mindful presence and communications for many years. He founded the Quest Insitute, a meditation center in Dallas, Texas. Brett has achieved a lot in his life. Having launched several businesses, he also worked as a Microsoft Senior Technical Evangelist and Worldwide Technical Readiness Manager, and he now focuses on helping professionals learn the power of consciousness and mindful communication. I totally enjoyed talking with Brett and resonated with his wisdom, his insight, and ability to bridge the technical world with the mindful world to create a better world. I hope you enjoyed the show. Hey, here we are with Brett Hill. Oh my goodness gracious, Brett, what is happening? What is going on, my friend? What's happening? What's up with you?
I'm sitting here talking to you, and you're lighting me up right this moment.
I'm lighting you up. Well, that's on purpose. You know that. You know I'm looking for the charge. So tell me, Brett, I'm so glad that you're here. You and I've been on your podcast. Here you are, you're on my podcast. But, in between all that, we keep running into each other. We keep bumping into each other. And
what's up with that?
What's up with that? Yeah, seriously, that's good stuff, right? But you just got finished doing this amazing conference on mindfulness. And, maybe you want to talk about that. I have a big question, why is mindfulness so hot? Why do you think it's the place to go ahead and look at right now? And tell me a little bit about TFIM. And, it's thank God it's Monday, or thank God it's, what is TFIM all about? And how did you get to do that?
Well, TFIM is the Future is Mindful.
Yes.
And that was coined by my colleague, Mark Montalbaum.
Love it.
And who you and I both met, I think,
Yes.
at the Institute for Organizational Mindfulness facilitator training.
Yep.
And he and I got to talking. And one of the things that became clear as a result of interacting with the people at that training. And then also I'm involved with the Inner MBA, it sounds true. And I've been meeting so many people who are involved in what you might call organizational mindfulness. And I was also the host for the Organizational Mindfulness podcast for the Institute.
That was stellar work.
Yeah, thank you. And so I keep meeting people who are involved with organizational mindfulness. And it became clear that something big is happening, really big, and people don't know about it. People in the general populace isn't aware of how much is going on at that level. And we're talking about really big efforts here.
Okay, got it. So organizational mindfulness is okay, that sounds great. And I love the letters, by the way, organizational mindfulness, OM. Not that we want to go there in organizational mindfulness, but tell me, what is that? What does that mean? And why is it different than, let's say, old mindfulness or regular mindfulness or everyday mindfulness, or what's different about it?
Well, the difference is we're talking about an organization isn't a person. Right. And so people do mindfulness. So this is how does an organization adopt a culture that supports the adoption and the principles of mindfulness in its organizational structure. So we're not talking about making a time for people just to be still for a minute, or putting up a booth and letting people be mindful in it, or sending people to a training and then just saying, hey, we're going to check the box. We're talking about actual adoption of mindful practices within the organizational culture.
Right. So you say organizations are not people, but yet, organizations are made up of the people. So your point
Exactly.
is that for an organization to be really, for organizations to be mindful, it really takes a village, right? It takes the community of the organization to come together to really kind of talk about, who they are, where they've been, where they're going, and then together work together as an organization to go ahead and make that happen. Is that right?
Well, exactly. It's like really what has to happen is the organizations, and we're seeing this in the Great Resignation, so to speak. I mean, you've heard of that, people quitting like crazy because they need to find meaning at work. And work has got to transform to a place that empowers the people who work there as well as produce whatever it is they're doing. Those two things cannot be independent of each other.
Got it. So the whole idea of a mindful organization is how can you go to work, be enriched by the relationships that you have there, be present to whatever they are, be present to whoever they're dealing with, and then all work together towards a common purpose. Right.
And feel like you belong, feel like you're engaged in meaningful work, that a place that actually connects with you and listens to your problems, as opposed to like, why didn't you make your numbers? It's kind of like, hey, is there anything going on?
Right. Exactly. That's great. So there's a sense of presence to the human experience, which really then takes it to another level, to what is the human potential and how can we go ahead and create or enrich individual lives to enrich the organization, yes, but also to enrich their personal lives, because everyone lives a personal life. And that line is getting thinner and thinner, which is back to your earlier point about the Great Resignation, right?
Right. And so that's what the future of mindful was about. It was about having this conversation. It's like, who is doing this work and what are we finding? What's going on out there? So it's kind of like, let's get the status quo out there. Let's get people talking. Let's create a context where people can come and say, hey, here's what we're doing and here's how it's going. And it was a really great experience.
I think you did a fantastic job there. And I really was very impressed by it. And I was enthused by it. And I feel like, we should have a Future is Mindful, event every single day. I mean, every single day should be a mindful day, right? The future is now. Why not be in the now? That was the future. Oh, excuse me.
I know it gets confusing, right? Because I did scratch my head. The future is mindful. Mindful is mindful. Now wait, I'm not going to go there.
Wait, that's
this
in the
is
past.
good.
What's going on? What's going on? So for those people, people have been listening to the podcast, I'm sure, and some people may say, well, what is that? What is mindfulness? So what does mindfulness, and the podcast name is the Mindfulness Experience. So what does mindfulness experience mean to you?
To me personally?
Yeah. What does it mean to you personally?
Well, that's kind of an unnameable question in a lot of ways. Really, it's just simply about connecting non-judgmentally with open acceptance to my in the moment experience.
So being present with whatever's going on in the now, and then being able to look at it and have that sort of recognition and make a choice as to how you want to deal with it, right?
Yeah, and the thing that's powerful about that is not just the objective sitting back and going, oh, there's that, there's this, but what that allows me to connect to is a much richer experience of the moment. And that's the juice, that's the payoff. It's not just being less reactive, it's being more connected.
And I want to kind of bring that into, your work. You in your work, you call yourself a storyteller. right? You've done a lot of work around storytelling. You were back in the corporate world. You did some storytelling there. And, I always talk about the default mode network of the brain, right?
Yeah.
Which is always telling us a story. So I'm wondering what is a storyteller and why do stories matter? Why do you think stories matter?
Stories give context to whatever it is you're trying to get across. And that's the thing. It's kind of like we see ourselves in stories of our life. And so whenever you hear a teaching point, so to speak, like what is the default mode network? Okay, that's one thing. But if you could tell a story about how, because I wasn't able to pay attention, because I was so obsessed with opening the door, pulling on that door, got to get the door open. What am I going to do? And then you take a breath, you sit down, you give up, and you look down on the floor, and there are the keys to the door.
Right. Because you get so freaked out that you're caught up in the what isn't rather than the stepping back and seeing what is.
You're so focused on the objective, which is the door is closed, I've got to open this. You get all rattled up and so narrow, your concentration and your focus becomes so narrow, you can't perceive the world around you.
Right.
And mindfulness is the skill of interrupting, noticing, I'm so contracted, I'm so angry, I can't even, is my anger going to get this door open? No. Yeah. So let me just take a breath and consider, and sit down and you start to look around, and then you notice, the keys to my problem are right there on the ground. And that's the metaphor for life, right? It's kind of like the keys to many of our problems are right in front of us. We just can't see them.
Right. So there you go. That's like the STOP metaphor, or the STOP acronym for stop, take a breath, observe, pause, proceed, or the RAIN acronym, recognize, accept, inquire or integrate, and then nurture, look at what's going on. So you've been involved with this in a while. And I looked at your bio and I was really intrigued because, you and I sort of share a kind of a parallel path in some way. You were in the technology area. I was in the telco area, the telecom technology area. You got involved in this whole area of mindfulness, this whole area of meditation, this whole area of really going down deep and starting to look at life, and you did some work. Tell me a little bit about your journey, if you're okay with that. I know you did some work around Hakomi. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah, that's
Hakomi?
right.
Yeah, and somatic psychotherapy. Maybe you can tell me a little bit about that, and about how did you get to where you are now? I know it's a long story.
That's a big question.
You don't have to get into birth and all that, but
I was born and no.
I feel like we're going to sing for a moment.
That's right. Wait, let's do that. You should have a podcast about that.
Oh yeah, I think that's great. I love that.
So I have always had an interest in a nutshell, I've been the kind of guy, I was the kind of kid that took his toys apart to see how they worked. I always wanted to know what makes this thing tick. And that's how I went up in technology. I kind of, I'm old enough to be around when PCs were invented, right? And so I'm looking at this and going, I have to know everything there is to know about this thing. So I was involved from the very, very beginning with PCs. And so whenever they became a thing, I was one of the only people around who knew anything about them. And so, Microsoft became big, and my whole career in many ways technically has been around the Microsoft stack. And I got hired by them to go and tell stories about the Microsoft solutions. And so I was what they called a technical evangelist. And so I would tell stories about how this technology is going to help your life be better. And
now,
so
did you travel around to different offices and tell them, this is the story, this is the narrative, this is the way you want to tell it?
Well, there was that. There was training people who tell the story, but then also I was on stage all over the world talking at conferences and trainings and stuff, pitching the goods, so to speak. But, actually trying to connect it up to people's real lives. This is going to save you time. This is going to make your life easier. Trying to show people how it matters. Now, you just take that same kind of, let's call it a core characteristic, someone who likes to know how things work, and you flip it on to people, because I've always been deeply fascinated with how do emotions work? How does communication work? How is it that we actually we are able to build a city or solve a pandemic or collaborate on anything. What's the mechanics of all of that? Because I had this epiphany when I was in college that the limits of what we can do as a species is really bounded by our ability to communicate.
Yeah.
And so I've been focused a lot of years on that kind of landed on mindful communications and being present with each other is really the fastest path to having the best outcomes and the best experience.
That's where the flow is, right?
That's
and
right.
And that led you to Hakomi, or what?
Yeah, that was when that really kicked in the afterburners on that is whenever because that's where I learned mindful presence in terms of being it was taught in the format and the structure of a client-therapist relationship. But that same technique, those same techniques of creating connection, creating empathy, having empathy, and I'm talking about legit empathy, not like cheap, I feel for you, but more like really
have
true
a nice
connection.
Day,
real connection, like really deeply
I hear
listening.
you, I see you, I feel you.
Yeah, in a profound way.
Got it.
And eventually that all morphs into, if I was to just fast forward like 15 years, I would say it basically boils down to loving presence and an intentional and a conscious decision to be in relationship with someone in a state of loving presence. And that I can't state enough the conscious choice part, how important that is.
Well, that's wonderful, because on the wings of mindfulness are compassion and wisdom, right? And, I don't think you can really do a good job with mindfulness. You can. I mean, you can be a mindful sharpshooter, and you can go ahead and, do things that are really evil in a very mindful way. But unless you really have compassion, that really is the growth element, and the wisdom is really the growth. So Hakomi really allowed you to go ahead and be in touch with that presence, that sense of presence around people, and that people were not different than you, or not to be manipulated in some way, but really to be looked at as, fellow connectors, fellow communicators, fellow builders of cities, as you say.
And in a particular way, there are a lot of skills involved with this, like paying attention to it's a somatic form of mindfulness-based psychotherapy. And so you really learn to pay attention to body language, listen to voice, and you learn to hear what's not said, but is embedded in the message. And so you really sort of learn, I call that listening behind the words. So you begin to hear people's story, the big arc of their story, in the small things. So they come to you and they say, well, I don't know what to do with my work. And you begin to hear that that's really just a placeholder for, I've been confused my whole life about how to belong.
Wow. That's big. That's very big. And that's sort of like walking, in between the raindrops, isn't it? In some way.
Precisely that. It's really the space between. And that's what on my website, I say, it's the language of mindfulness.com. I'm sorry to pitch my website, but that's like, on that I say, it's what goes on between us.
Right.
That's the key. That's the thing.
That's the subtle tones, right? I always, when we do a meditation, I'll often with clients, I'll say, now listen to the sound, now listen to the space in between the sound.
That's it.
Listen to the space, the silence in between the sound.
The stillness.
The stillness, which is great.
That's where all the good stuff happens.
That's where all the good stuff happens. And then you went on and you did some other work around Quest Insitute. I love the name. What is that? What was that all about?
In my early days, I was a I was a meditation instructor. And so I had run across a guy who was teaching a form of Paramahansa Yogananda's work, which was kind of a Kriya meditation. And I became a teacher in that. And I moved to Dallas to go to work for a tech company before my Microsoft years. And one thing led to another, and I wound up teaching people how to meditate. And eventually it was too many people to have in my house. And so we established we rented a building, and it became the Quest Institute. And There were, about 150 people or so. And so that became a thing. It just grew up very organically out of just one person told another and another. So
that's great.
So it was.
So Kriya, you taught them Kriya. So learning how to breathe, basically, right?
Learning how to breathe, but use energy. It's like energy work. So it's kind of like moving energy in your body in a particular way. And this was very much connected to the idea of connecting up to what people might call the divine or a spiritual space.
Right. And the wonderful thing about that, I mean, it's from a visualization viewpoint, it's not like woo-woo. I mean, it's just being able to go ahead and manifest your own energy. And I guess the Chinese call it Qigong, and then the Hindus or the yoga people might call it Tantra, moving energy from your
prana,
chi, whatever.
Lots of names for this.
So you've been like, you've really traveled the metasphere, the biosphere, the cognosphere, and really looking at ways that people would connect into not only the digital sphere, but also to the biosphere, to themselves, right?
Yeah. I had a coach I was working with. He said, I'm a cross-platform coach. And I can deal with the technology, the soma, the psychology, the woo-woo. It's all in my wheelhouse.
I get it. And I love that. Now, one of the things that you said on your website in your bio was that you said that you can turn ordinary conversations into extraordinary experiences. What do you mean by that?
Well, you can have a remarkable moment just checking out with somebody at the grocery store. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you both share that moment, but because a lot of it is what is the state that you are in. And so if you're experiencing somebody in a really deep way, you're really connecting to kind of appreciation and seeing and feeling not just the words that they're speaking, but the person that's standing in front of you, and understanding that they have a history, they have ancestors, they have things they're fighting for, they have things that they're hoping for, they have things they're struggling with. And if you're really in touch with that, and when you're talking with somebody, you are having a rich experience of another person. Now, I'm not talking about making up a story about them, but letting yourself be present with the truth of that. Because it really goes pretty far. And when you're connected to that and you interact with somebody, it changes the conversation. It makes it different, and it causes people notice. And so suddenly these very mundane interactions become very rich experiences.
I really like that. There's a word sonder. I don't know if you're familiar with the word, but it's a great word. And it really means that, like there are 7 billion experiences going on, 7 billion realities going on in the world, and everyone, and the word means, everyone is living a very rich experience. To your point, I love that, which is very deep to, back to their ancestors, their family, something going on with their health or their objectives, or just living life day to day, just surviving life. I think that's really very poignant. We can get caught up in our own story, as they say, it's the story of me, and I'm the star of the show, and you're just a bit player in my show. People get caught up in that, right?
No, you do. You spend a whole lifetime that way.
Yeah, and and it's all about me. And let me tell you more about me. Yeah.
Well, and that's, as you say, that's the default mode network. It's like you can't help but create a story about yourself, because that's what surfaces from simple interaction with the world. I'm lucky, I'm unlucky, I'm someone who's healthy or unhealthy, or people like me or people don't, or I can sing well and people like it. Whatever your experience is, your brain creates a story around it.
Right.
And the trick, not the trick, but one of the gifts of mindfulness is to realize that you are not your story.
Yeah. And I think to that point, one of the things I say is change your story and you change your life.
Right. Yeah. And even I would say go a bit deeper, give up your story and become you.
Right. So, and that's good, because many people are holding on to their past, right? The past is regret. Sure. The future is anxiety, and they're not living in the now because they're caught up with regret, coulda, woulda, shoulda, and they're caught up with anxiety. I need to, I must, where's my schedule? I need to show up, if you will, and not being in the now. And you're saying something very different, which is get rid of your story.
Yeah, I'm saying just realize that any story you have about yourself is just a story you have about yourself.
And it's meaningless, and it's meaningless that it's meaningless.
Well, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's meaningless personally. I would just say it's not you.
Right.
It's like you might truly be a smart person, right? And so your feedback is, okay, you're a smart guy. Like, okay, well, you can walk around the world, well, I'm smart, blah, 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 and that's me.
Right,
okay,
right.
Then someone gives you feedback, well, you're not smart, and that goes against not just your belief, but your very identity.
Oh, I'm crushed. I'm crushed. Right.
So how could you say that? That's just crazy. Yeah, that's unbelievable.
That's like the story of the guy at the airport, right? You remember that story? The executive who's not able to get on the flight right away, and he says to the person at the desk, I have to get on that flight. Do you have any idea who I am? Do you know who I am? Do you have any idea who I am? And she says, hold on a second. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a man here who doesn't know who he is. Can anyone help him?
I know. And you see that so much. It's like, if you knew how important I was, you would treat me different. Right. And that's the story. That's completely a story.
Right. So what's wrong with that? We get a lot of pushback, the world's doing okay. Hey, this mindfulness stuff, great. I'm glad you're on it. Glad you're involved with it. Good for you. I hope it turns out all right. What's wrong with the way things are, and why do things need to change, in your opinion? I mean, you're doing the future is mindful. I'm just wondering what your kind of takeaways from that are when we start taking a look at stories, because obviously people have their stories. People have their
sure.
Why do I need to get rid of it? What's wrong with it?
Because it's the source of all suffering. It's like, a single individual might be doing well. In fact, Cliff Smith at the conference, his talk, he talks about, like, why would executives who, they're into multiple seven figures, like, why would they be caring about becoming mindful? Because being who they are has got them where they are. It's because the next level of effectiveness, of integration, of connection, of productivity, even, this is where it is. So there's just there's that level. But if you look at all of the real significant problems in the world, they are all based on identification with something that isn't real. Which, if you get down to who we really are and our real core and our essence, it's not I'm a lefty or I'm a righty or I'm this or I'm that. It's like we're human beings and we care about the same things. We want our children to be healthy. We want to be happy. We want to be we want to be people who feel good about our world. We all have so much in common. And if we were to connect more to what's happening in me now, rather than, well, I feel like that because those people got something that I didn't, that's an infringement on my world. Those are just ideas. They're not actually happening.
So I want to get back to where you were before about the Great Resignation, right? You did this, the future is mindful. And, I'm really wondering, like, is the current leadership, is what's going on in the world, is it working? I mean, and that goes to the question, why change things the way they are? Many stressed out leaders are toxic, right? They don't have emotional intelligence. They lack self-awareness, self-compassion. They lack awareness of others. And, they're paying themselves these extraordinary salaries. They're going ahead and, taking advantage of people, and they really have a hard time acknowledging their own mistakes. So from the viewpoint of, organizations, I would say that you're I think you're right on, you're spot on, and there can be, I think, a better way of doing business, right?
Well, right. And the point of this is, like Mike Foster says of the Institute for Organizational Mindfulness, he says, if the organizations that don't adopt some kind of mindfulness practice embedded in their organizations are going to be at a competitive disadvantage in the near future.
Right.
Because everybody's doing this. All the big companies are taking this on as not just important from, it's important for them to attract, retain, keep engaged people. So there's just a fact of the matter that mindfulness is sort of a keystone magnet to be able to do all of that. And then there's the impact of that in the organization, because once you bring more mindful people into the organization, that's going to bring changes in the organization. And those changes are going to be beneficial to the organization.
Yeah, I mean, the cost of turnover is extraordinary when you start taking a look at not only the fact that you've got to recruit, train, you've got to look at productivity, lost expertise, so on and so forth. And my understanding is that it costs as much as 20% of an employee's salary to replace them, never mind all the additional cost of having to bring them up to speed.
Yeah, I think that's conservative, actually.
Yeah, really?
Yeah. Because, I mean, you look at onboarding, you look at loss of institutional knowledge, you look at all kinds of stuff. It's not like you can get rid of somebody and hire someone the next day and they just pick up all the balls in the air, right? There's a whole big lag time in terms of getting up to speed and reintegration. And so you lose months and months and months and months and months of productivity and some of that institutional knowledge, depending on the person that you're talking about, may never be recaptured. And that has an impact on the fact that the people who are onboarding simply do not know the details that other people who have left didn't know. And that results in inefficient decision-making and execution.
Right. Well, that's huge. And when you had this Future is Mindful conference, there was a lot of those discussions going on, weren't there?
Yeah. There was a ton of these conversations going on around how do we engage in a way that is embracing the wholeness of what people are. That organizations have to become places that recognize not just that we want to get things done, but we want to do so in a way that embraces the humanity of the people that are doing the work.
Wow. Well, I got to say that the conference itself was absolutely spectacular. Where do you think that, as taking this going forward, when you start taking a look at the Future is Mindful, where do you think that you might want to go with this? Because it was a stellar event.
Well, thank you so kindly. I really appreciate that. It was an interesting experiment because, Mark and I just decided, well, if this is true, if there's this conversation that wants to happen, let's just invite some people, and we went for kind of the A list because we had a really amazing list of speakers, and see what they say. And the remarkable thing is that they all said yes. Every one of them. We're talking, Scott Shute, Tammy Simon from Sounds True. I mean, it was like unbelievable the people that showed up. Brian Welch from Mindfulness showed. It's like, I'm like, oh my God. Well, if they're showing up for this, then we're really onto something. Right. So we're thinking that we'll do another one. We don't know when exactly yet, but that's we're beginning planning for round two, and we're continuing to have these webinars that we're offering for the people that are on the mailing list. They can go to the website, thefutureismindful.com, and see webinars that we're offering every week. They're free, completely free to see.
Well, the beauty of it is the community. And I think that was probably it was very unlike any other events that a lot of people might be used to going on a Zoom or going like that. I mean, you really were able to build community and able to build conversation. And I think that more than anything, today, we really long for that community, that sense of, hey, I'm with people who really not only get what I'm about, but also really want to nurture it and grow it and really develop it. So, cheers, 3 cheers and kudos. And as I said before, where do I sign up? And how do we go ahead and make this puppy run and bark and do all the things that it needs to be in the world?
Yeah, well, we are at this point, we're kind of regrouping and seeing what's next. So, sign up for our community membership at thefutureismindful.com, and that will get you on the announcement list. And we do have some great recordings that are there that are available on the website of the keynote. So you could get a registration that lets you see those. And then stay tuned, as we're thinking very soon we're going to be having some what we call community keynotes, where we invite the community to come and let's just hear what people have to say. We're not going to schedule like a big name brand speaker, and just hear from the community and see what's going on.
Right. Well, as I've always said, in a room at any particular point, there's more brain trust and more knowledge within that room than any one speaker. So it's always nice to hear from the community. And I think that's fantastic. And you're also very much involved as a coach and as a consultant and working with organizations. Can you just speak to that for a moment, if you don't mind?
Sure. I have a website, the Language of Mindfulness.com. It's just languageofmindfulness.com, and a podcast, and et cetera. And I do coaching and I do consulting and advising with people, and also some courses for organizations in terms of mindful communications. So people can reach out to me and connect up around all of that. And I'm happy to help. I'm very passionate about this, and the work that I do, particularly the one-on-one work, it goes deep. We get real.
Well, it's really fantastic, and I'm very excited and very happy that you chose to be on the podcast with me and really share your knowledge and wisdom, Brett, with everyone. I want to thank you very much for showing up.
Thank you for the invitation. You're doing such a great job with this, and I really appreciate it. So thank you for the good work and getting the word out, and for the work that you do.
Yeah, there's more to come.
Yay, I'm excited.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for being a part of the Mindfulness Experience podcast. I hope you enjoyed this compassionate and honest discussion with Brett Hill. I also hope you gained some insights about how mindfulness can be incorporated into your organization on a day-to-day basis to live a better life and communicate more mindfully. Please follow the podcast to connect for future ones as well. Subscribe, leave us a review, and suggest topics that you'd like to hear. Connect with us on our social media platforms or visit our website at workmindfulness.com for more mindfulness experiences. Thank you again. Hope to see you on the next show. Take care.